My name is Harper Wilson, and at 32 years old, I never expected to become invisible to my own family. 6 months ago, I packed up my Chicago apartment and moved across the country to Seattle for my dream job as a senior software designer. Not a single family member noticed I was gone. Not one call, not one text. Until yesterday, when my father suddenly called demanding I fly back for my brother Jacob's wedding. He needs his perfect family portrait complete. If you are watching this from somewhere your family undervalues, you drop a comment telling me where you are, hit that like button, and subscribe to join others who understand what it means to be the forgotten child. Growing up in our sprawling mansion in Chicago's North Shore, I should have had the perfect childhood. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. My father, Richard Wilson, was a high-powered corporate attorney who made partner by 35. My mother, Diana, was a renowned cardiovascular surgeon at Northwestern Memorial. Our family had wealth, status, and connections throughout the city. What we lacked was warmth. From my earliest memories, I was always an afterthought in my parents' lives. My brother Jacob, 2 years younger, somehow became the sun around which our family orbited. He was their miracle baby born after what my mother called complications, though she never explained what those were. Jacob had the charming smile, the natural athletic ability, and the easy confidence that made him the favorite of everyone he met. I still remember my 8th birthday party. My parents had promised something special, but when the day came, my father was called away for an emergency with a client, and my mother was stuck in surgery. The housekeeper, Mrs. Jenkins, bought a small cake from the grocery store and sang happy birthday to me alone. 2 weeks later, for Jacob's 6th birthday, they rented out the entire local amusement park, invited 50 kids, and hired a popular children's television host to make an appearance. That pattern continued throughout our childhood. My straight A's were expected and barely acknowledged. Jacob's B- grades were celebrated with dinners out and new video games as rewards for his improvement. When I won the state science fair in 10th grade, my parents were at Jacob's basketball game. I took the bus home alone with my trophy, while they took him for ice cream to console him for losing the game. College was supposed to be my escape. I worked harder than anyone in my class and earned a full scholarship to MIT for computer science. The day I received my acceptance letter, I ran home bursting with excitement. My parents were hosting a dinner party for potential clients. When I tried to share my news, my mother pulled me aside. "Harper, not now. These people are very important to your father. Why not go up to your room and do your homework?" "But Mom, I got into MIT with a full scholarship," I whispered. She gave me a distracted nod. "That's nice, honey. We expected you would. Could you please ask Mrs. Jenkins to bring out more wine for our guests?" I was 18, had just achieved something incredible, and I was being asked to play servant at my parents' business dinner. The worst moment came during my sophomore year at college. I had been selected for a prestigious undergraduate research award. Only 5 students in the country received it. The ceremony was on a Saturday, and for once, my parents promised they would be there. I reserved them front row seats. As I scanned the audience before going on stage, I saw 2 empty chairs where they should have been. After the ceremony, I had 3 missed calls from my mother. Jacob had a regional swimming meet that was rescheduled to the same day. They decided his high school sports event was more important than my national academic recognition. I never told them how I felt. I just stopped expecting them to show up. When my mother fell ill with pneumonia during my junior year, I was asked to take a semester off to help at home. Not Jacob, who was attending college locally. Me, who was halfway across the country maintaining a perfect GPA. I complied, because that's what dutiful daughters do. That semester turned into a year. By the time I returned to school, I had lost my research position and my momentum. To pay my way through the rest of college, I took coding jobs and worked at the campus IT department. I learned to be completely self-sufficient. When other students went home for holidays, I picked up extra shifts. When they complained about helicopter parents, I stayed quiet about the ones who barely remembered I existed. After graduation, I tried to maintain a relationship with my family. I would return to Chicago for major holidays, sitting quietly at the dinner table while everyone celebrated Jacob's latest achievements. If I tried to talk about my job or my life, the conversation quickly shifted back to more interesting topics like my brother's new girlfriend or my father's latest high-profile case. Christmas 2 years ago was the breaking point. I had just been promoted to lead developer at my company, a major achievement in my field. As we sat around the dinner table, my mother turned to me and said, "Harper, you're so quiet. Are you still doing that computer thing? Have you thought about going back to school for something more suitable?" "More suitable than my six-figure salary job creating software used by millions of people?" I asked. My father chuckled. "Your mother just means something more sociable. You always were better with machines than people." I looked around the table and realized they had no idea who I was. They had created a narrative about me as the socially awkward, less successful child, and no achievement of mine would change that story. So I stopped trying. I smiled politely through the rest of dinner, helped clean up, and went to the guest room. That night I decided I would build a life so complete and fulfilling that their absence would no longer leave a hole. My move to Seattle 6 months ago marked the beginning of my real life. After accepting the position as senior product designer at Horizon Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, I found a luxury apartment in Capitol Hill with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Each morning I wake up to the sight of ferries gliding across the water and the distant Olympic Mountains framed in my bedroom window. The salary package Horizon offered was beyond generous. My base compensation was twice what I had been making in Chicago, with stock options and performance bonuses that could potentially double that amount. For the first time in my life, I felt my work was truly valued. My new colleagues quickly became friends. Unlike the competitive environment of my previous job, Horizon cultivated collaboration and mutual support. My team lead Marcus immediately recognized my skills and gave me the freedom to shape our newest product line. Within 2 months, I was asked to present my vision for our consumer app to the executive board. When they approved my proposal with enthusiastic praise, Marcus promoted me to Director of User Experience. Outside of work, I discovered a community that embraced me completely. My neighbor Eliza, a free-spirited artist who sells her paintings at Pike Place Market, invited me to a local book club during my first week in the building. Through that group I met Jasmine, a brilliant environmental attorney, and Daniel, a pediatric nurse with the most infectious laugh. The three of them showed me around the city, taking me to hidden coffee shops, secret viewpoints, and neighborhood festivals I never would have found on my own. Weekends became adventures rather than lonely stretches to fill. Jasmine taught me to kayak in Lake Union. Daniel introduced me to his hiking group, and suddenly my Saturdays were spent exploring mountain trails and alpine lakes. Eliza convinced me to try a cooking class, where I discovered I actually enjoyed creating elaborate meals when I had friends to share them with. With each passing week, I felt more at home in Seattle than I ever had in Chicago. I joined a community garden and learned to grow my own vegetables. I volunteered at a local coding workshop for teenage girls, teaching them the skills that had given me independence. I even adopted a rescue dog, a gentle golden retriever mix named Luna, who became my constant companion. 3 months after moving, I received an unexpected call from my division VP. My consumer app design had exceeded all projections, gaining 1 million users in its first quarter. The company wanted to create a new department focused on user-centered products with me as its director. The promotion came with a corner office, a team of 15 designers and developers, and a compensation package that made me momentarily dizzy when I saw the numbers. That same week, I found a charming craftsman house in Ballard with a view of the Sound and a backyard perfect for Luna. The real estate market was competitive, but my new salary allowed me to make an offer the sellers couldn't refuse. By month 4, I was a homeowner in one of Seattle's most desirable neighborhoods. With each success, I waited for the urge to call my parents and share my news. Somehow that urge never came. I realized I had spent my entire life hungry for validation they were incapable of giving. Here in Seattle, surrounded by people who saw and appreciated me for who I actually was, that hunger finally began to subside. My calendar filled with dinner parties, gallery openings, and weekend trips to the San Juan Islands. I started a small investment portfolio with guidance from a financial advisor Jasmine recommended. I even began dating again, enjoying the company of interesting men, without the pressure to find someone my parents would approve of. 6 months passed without a single call, text, or email from my family. No birthday wishes, no checking if I was alive and well. At first, it stung to realize they truly hadn't noticed my absence. But gradually that pain transformed into liberation. I had been carrying the weight of their indifference for so long that its absence made me lighter, more confident, more myself. My life had taken shape around my own desires and values, rather than the constant futile effort to earn attention from people who couldn't give it. I had stopped checking my phone for messages that never came. I had stopped crafting careful updates they would never read. I had stopped waiting for approval that would never arrive. I was free, successful, and for the first time in my life, genuinely happy. I had unconsciously cut ties with the family that had never truly seen me, and in doing so, had finally found myself. It was a crisp autumn morning when everything changed. I was preparing for a major presentation to our board of directors about expanding my department internationally. Luna was curled at my feet as I reviewed my slides one last time. My phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in months, my father. For a moment I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. I answered with a neutral "Hello, Dad." "Harper, good I caught you." His voice had that brisk business tone he used when calling clients. "No, how are you?" No acknowledgement of the time that had passed without contact. "I need you to block off the weekend of November 12th. Your brother is getting married." I paused, waiting for more. A question about my life, perhaps. An observation that we hadn't spoken in months. Nothing came. "I see," I finally said. "Congratulations to Jacob. Who's he marrying?" "Elizabeth Bradford," he said, with the distinct note of pride he reserved for Jacob's accomplishments. "Bradford Construction. Her father is Thomas Bradford." Of course, I thought. A business alliance disguised as a romance. The Bradfords were Chicago royalty old money, with connections throughout the Midwest. "The ceremony will be at the Drake Hotel," he continued. "You'll need to be in Chicago by Thursday for the rehearsal dinner. Your mother has selected an appropriate dress for you. Navy blue conservative. It matches the family aesthetic." Family aesthetic. As if we were a brand rather than people related by blood. "Actually, Dad, I won't be able to make it," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. There was a long pause. "What do you mean you won't be able to make it? This is your brother's wedding." "I have commitments here that I can't break," I said. It wasn't entirely untrue. I had a major product launch the following week. "Whatever commitments you have in Chicago can be rescheduled. This is family." I took a deep breath. I'm not in Chicago anymore, Dad. I moved to Seattle 6 months ago. The silence that followed was deafening. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight with controlled anger. You moved across the country without telling us. Yes, I said simply. When were you planning to share this information? The irony of his indignation was almost laughable. When were you planning to notice I was gone? I countered. He cleared his throat, clearly thrown off balance. We've all been very busy. Jacob's engagement has taken up a lot of our attention. For 6 months I wanted to ask, but I held my tongue. Regardless, he continued, recovering quickly. This changes nothing. You'll fly from Seattle instead of driving from wherever you were living in Chicago. I'll have my assistant book your tickets. Dad, I said I can't make it. I have responsibilities here. What could possibly be more important than your brother's wedding? The Bradfords are expecting to meet our entire family. Thomas Bradford has connections that could be valuable to my firm. This is not just about Jacob. This is about our family's reputation. There it was. The real reason for the call. Not because they missed me or wanted me present for an important life event. Because a potential business partner expected a perfect family portrait, and my absence would raise questions they didn't want to answer. I'm sorry, but I won't be attending, I repeated. Harper Jean Wilson, he said, using my full name, as he had when I was a child in trouble. You will be at this wedding. The Bradfords are extremely traditional. Family is everything to them. How would it look if Jacob's only sister refused to attend his wedding? I don't know, Dad. How did it look when neither of my parents attended my college graduation or my award ceremony or any significant event in my life? Another pause. I could practically hear him recalibrating his approach. Those were different circumstances, he said dismissively. This is about supporting your brother on the most important day of his life. I support Jacob finding happiness, I said. I'll send a generous gift, but I won't be there in person. Your mother will be devastated, he tried next, appealing to the guilt that had worked so effectively in the past. Please give her my love, I said, unmoved. He sighed heavily, shifting tactics again. If you're concerned about taking time off work, I can call your supervisor. Where are you working now? Still doing that computer thing. That computer thing. My career, my passion, my source of pride and independence reduced to that thing I did because I couldn't succeed at something better. I'm the director of user experience at Horizon Technologies, I said, unable to keep a note of pride from my voice. Never heard of it, he dismissed. Is it a startup? Those things fold overnight, Harper. You should be thinking about stability at your age. I closed my eyes, counting to 10 silently. Horizon is a Fortune 500 company with over 20,000 employees worldwide. And I'm doing very well, thank you for asking. Good, good, he said absently. Now about the wedding. You'll need to arrive looking rested. The photographer wants family photos at 3 on Friday. Don't wear anything flashy. The focus should be on Jacob and Elizabeth. It was as if he hadn't heard a word I'd said. In his mind, I had already acquiesced as I always had before. Dad, I'm not coming to the wedding. My decision is final. His voice turned cold. Harper, you are part of this family whether you like it or not. You have obligations. If you refuse to fulfill them, there will be consequences. What consequences exactly? I asked, genuinely curious. Your trust fund, for one. The vacation property in Michigan. Your place in this family's legacy. Is your petty rebellion worth throwing all that away? For the first time in our conversation, I laughed. A real, genuine laugh that took both of us by surprise. Dad, I said when I could speak again, I haven't touched my trust fund in years. I make my own money now. Quite a lot of it, actually. This isn't about money, Harper. This is about respect, about honoring your family. No, this is about appearances, about using me as a prop in your perfect family portrait, and I'm done being a prop. I'm very disappointed in you, he said, his voice stern. We'll discuss this further after you've had time to reconsider your priorities. The call ended with my father clearly believing I would eventually give in. He didn't know the woman I had become, the woman who had built a life without their approval or attention, the woman who finally understood her own worth. The days following my father's call brought a deluge of communication from family members who had been perfectly content to ignore my existence for the previous 6 months. My mother called the very next morning, her voice tight, with what she probably thought was maternal concern. Harper, your father told me about your ridiculous decision. I simply cannot believe you would be so selfish. No hello. No how have you been. Just straight to my failings as a daughter. Hello to you too, Mom, I said. How have you been these past 6 months? Did you ever wonder where I was, or how I was doing? She paused, momentarily thrown off script. We've all been very busy with Jacob's engagement. You know how these things are. The Bradfords are a very prominent family. Yes, Dad mentioned that about 10 times. There's no need for sarcasm, she snapped. This is serious, Harper. Your brother needs his entire family present on his special day. Did Jacob tell you that? Because he hasn't called me in over a year. He's been busy, she said defensively. Between the hospital and planning the wedding with Elizabeth, he barely has time to sleep. Jacob had followed in our mother's footsteps, becoming a surgeon. Unlike me, he had received financial support throughout medical school and residency. My parents had purchased his condo as a graduation gift. I'm busy too, Mom. I have a demanding career and commitments I can't break. What could possibly be more important than family? What will we tell people when they ask why Jacob's sister isn't at his wedding? Have you thought about how this makes us look? There it was again. Image over substance, appearances over actual relationships. Tell them the truth, I suggested. That you didn't notice I moved across the country 6 months ago, and when you finally called it was only to demand I serve as an extra in your family photo op. That is completely unfair, she gasped. We've always supported you, Harper. We gave you everything. Really name one important event in my adult life that you attended. The silence stretched between us. That's what I thought I said quietly. I'm sorry, Mom, but I won't be at the wedding. You'll break your brother's heart, she tried, her voice trembling slightly. After everything we've done for you. I ended the call promising to think about it, knowing my decision was already made. Jacob called the next day, his voice carrying that forced cheer he used when he wanted something. Sis, long time no talk. How's life in the Windy City? I wouldn't know, I replied. I moved to Seattle 6 months ago. No way! That's awesome! Always knew you were the adventurous one. He laughed as if we were sharing an inside joke, as if we had the kind of relationship where such things existed. Mom and Dad said, "You're being difficult about the wedding," he continued, switching tactics with impressive speed. Come on, Harper. I need my big sister there. Remember how you used to look out for me when we were kids? A bizarre revision of history. I remembered being asked to stay home from my own events to babysit him. I remembered being told to let him win at games to boost his confidence. I remembered being his unpaid tutor, his chauffeur, his constant cheerleader, while receiving none of that support in return. Jacob, we both know we haven't been close in years, I said gently. When was the last time we had a real conversation? We're talking now, aren't we? Look, I know we've drifted apart. That's on me. I've been swamped with work and wedding stuff, but this is a chance for us to reconnect. Elizabeth, is dying to meet you. Is she? Or does she just want a complete set of family members for the wedding photos? That's harsh, sis. He sounded genuinely hurt. She's a great person. You'd like her if you gave her a chance. Perhaps that was true, but I wasn't willing to fly across the country for a performance of family unity that would end as soon as the last guest left the reception. I'm sorry, Jacob. I have commitments here that I can't break. I'll send a nice gift. Harper, please. Mom and Dad are freaking out. Elizabeth's family is really traditional. They'll think it's weird if my only sibling isn't there. Then maybe Mom and Dad should have worked harder at actually being parents to both their children, not just their favorite. The words escaped before I could stop them. A lifetime of hurt compressed into one bitter sentence. That's not fair, Jacob said, his voice dropping. You always had it easier, the smart one who never had to try. Do you know how hard it was growing up in your shadow, always hearing how brilliant Harper was? I almost dropped the phone. His shadow. My entire childhood had been spent watching from the sidelines as my parents centered their world around him. Jacob, that's simply not true, I said. And I think you know it. Whatever. If you don't want to be there for the most important day of my life, that's your choice. I thought you were better than that. He hung up before I could respond. The next call came from Elizabeth herself, a woman I had never met, but who spoke as if we were already family. Harper, it's Elizabeth Bradford. Well, soon to be Elizabeth Wilson. I just had to call and introduce myself personally. Her voice was pure North Shore privilege, each word carefully enunciated in that particular accent that comes from expensive private schools and debutante training. Hello, Elizabeth. Congratulations on your engagement. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be joining your wonderful family. Your parents have been absolute dreams throughout the planning process, and Jacob is just perfect. I wondered what version of my family she had been shown. The Wilsons who appeared in charity gala photographs and hospital board meetings, no doubt. Not the cold, distant people I had grown up with. Jacob's lucky to have found someone who makes him happy, I said diplomatically. Oh, we're perfect together. Everyone says so. She laughed lightly. Now about the wedding. Your parents mentioned you're having some trouble with the dates. I have work commitments that I can't reschedule, I explained. But surely your boss would understand. It's for your brother's wedding. Family comes first, don't you think? I'm actually the boss, I said. And we have a major product launch that week. Oh well, couldn't you delegate? Just for a few days, the Bradfords have always believed that showing up for family is the ultimate sign of character. The implication was clear. My absence would reflect poorly on my character, on my family, and by extension on her perfect wedding narrative. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. I won't be able to make it. But I wish you both all the happiness in the world. But you're the maid of honor, she exclaimed. I froze. I'm what? The maid of honor, she repeated slowly, as if I might not understand the words. Jacob insisted. He said you two have always been so close. I felt a wave of anger so intense it momentarily robbed me of speech. Not once had Jacob or my parents mentioned this detail. They had assigned me a central role in this wedding without even asking me, without even speaking to me for months. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but that's impossible. No one discussed this with me. But the programs are already printed, she said, her voice rising slightly. All the arrangements have been made. What am I supposed to do now? I suggest you talk to Jacob and your future in-laws, I said, struggling to keep my voice even. Since they're the ones who made promises on my behalf without my knowledge or consent. The calls continued. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had urgent opinions about my attendance at Jacob's wedding. Some sounded genuinely confused about why I might not attend. Others were clearly calling at my parents' behest, applying pressure from all sides. Each conversation left me more exhausted than the last. My Seattle friends watched with growing concern as the bombardment continued. Eliza brought over wine and listened as I vented my frustration. Daniel offered to come to Chicago with me as moral support if I decided to go. Jasmine Ever, the attorney, suggested I write a formal letter declining the invitation and then block all their numbers for my own peace of mind. A week after the initial call, my father phoned again. His voice was no longer cajoling or manipulative. It was cold, authoritative, the voice he used in the courtroom. "Harper, this has gone far enough. Your mother is beside herself. Jacob is embarrassed. The Bradfords are beginning to ask questions. You will be on a plane to Chicago next month. You will wear the dress your mother selected, and you will perform your duties as sister of the groom and maid of honor without complaint. This is not a request." Or what Dad, I asked, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Or you can consider yourself cut off from your trust fund, from any inheritance from this family. Is that really what you want? To throw away everything over one weekend?" "I didn't realize my place in this family was conditional on absolute obedience," I said. "Don't be dramatic. This is about responsibility, about being there when your family needs you." Where was that sentiment when I needed you? All those years, all those milestones, you missed all those times. I needed my parents and got nothing but empty chairs and excuses. That's ancient history, Harper. This is happening now, and it's important. Important to whom? To Jacob? Or to your business relationship with Thomas Bradford? He made a dismissive sound. "You always were stubborn, just like your mother. I'm giving you one last chance to do the right thing. Be at that wedding, or consider yourself disinherited." The word hung between us. Disinherited, cast out, no longer a Wilson in the ways that mattered to my father: money, property, social standing. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settle over me. "Is that your final word on the subject?" "It is," he said firmly. "The choice is yours." "Then I've made my decision," I said. "I won't be attending the wedding, and you can keep your money, your property, and your approval. I don't need any of it anymore." "You're making a terrible mistake," he warned. "One you'll regret for the rest of your life." "No, Dad. For the first time, I'm not making a mistake. I'm choosing myself over the role you want me to play, and that's a choice I'll never regret." He hung up without another word. I sat in my living room, Luna's head on my lap, and waited for the panic or grief to hit me. Instead, I felt only relief. The ties that had bound me to their expectations had finally been cut, not by them, but by me. The morning after my father's ultimatum, I received a text from my childhood friend Megan, who still lived in Chicago. "Just heard the craziest rumor at the country club. Your mom told everyone you couldn't attend Jacob's wedding because you're doing humanitarian work in Africa. Apparently you're building schools or vaccinating children or something equally noble. Thought you should know what they're saying." I stared at the message, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in my throat. Africa. They couldn't even be bothered to create a believable lie. Anyone who knew me would realize immediately that I wasn't the type to abandon my career for humanitarian work across the world. But perhaps that was the point. No one in their social circle actually knew me. More messages arrived throughout the day. Another family friend had heard I was undergoing a secret medical treatment. Someone else had been told I was on a classified government assignment. The stories grew more elaborate and contradictory as my parents scrambled to explain my absence without admitting the truth. That evening, feeling emotionally drained, I pulled out an old photo album I had brought with me from Chicago. I hadn't looked at it since moving, but suddenly felt compelled to confront the visual evidence of my place in the family. The pattern was striking once I began looking for it. In photo after photo, I stood at the edge of the frame while Jacob occupied the center, flanked by our beaming parents. At my high school graduation, they stood closer to my friend's family than to me. At Christmas gatherings, I was often partially cropped out, an afterthought in the composition. There was a photo from my 5th birthday. I was smiling at the camera holding a small cake with 5 candles. No other people were in the frame. I remembered that day clearly. Mrs. Jenkins had taken the picture because my parents were at a charity gala. Jacob, deemed too young to attend, had been taken by our grandmother to a Disney movie. I flipped through 20 years of visual evidence of my peripheral existence in my own family. By the final pages, my appearances had grown even rarer, as if I were gradually fading from the family narrative altogether. The next morning I arrived at work distracted and unsettled. My colleague Sophia, a woman in her 50s who had become something of a mentor to me, noticed immediately. "Harper, you look like you haven't slept. What's going on?" Over coffee in her office, I found myself telling her everything. The years of emotional neglect, the brother who was the sun, while I was barely a distant planet, the wedding drama, and my father's ultimatum. Sophia listened without interruption, her eyes compassionate but clear. When I finished, she took my hands in hers. "Harper, I want you to answer one question for me. If your family suddenly vanished tomorrow, if they ceased to exist, what would you actually lose?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it again. What would I lose? Not daily contact or emotional support, not guidance or comfort, not even the sense of belonging to something greater than myself. Their approval, I finally said. The hope that someday they might see me, really see me. Sophia nodded. And has chasing that approval made you happy? Has it made you feel worthy? Or has it done the opposite? Tears filled my eyes. The opposite, I whispered. Then perhaps this ultimatum is actually a gift, she said gently. A chance to finally stop running after something that was never going to fulfill you anyway. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my house, reviewing every painful memory, every slight, every moment I had shrunk myself to fit their expectations. The time I downplayed a promotion because Jacob had failed his medical boards. The time I wore a dress I hated to a family event because my mother insisted it was more appropriate than the elegant pantsuit I had chosen. The times I had swallowed my opinions, my needs, my very self, to avoid rocking their carefully constructed boat. By dawn I felt hollowed out but strangely clear. I took Luna for a long walk along the waterfront as the sun rose over the Cascades, painting the sky in pink and gold. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my grief for the family I had never really had, the parents who couldn't love me as I needed to be loved, the brother who had been set up as my competitor rather than my ally. I returned home to find several missed calls from my father. I listened to his voicemail, his voice tighter and more urgent than before. "Harper, this has gone too far. The Bradford family is asking questions we can't answer. Your mother had to lie to Elizabeth's grandmother about your whereabouts. This is becoming embarrassing. Call me immediately." Embarrassing. Not hurtful or sad or unfortunate, embarrassing. Even now, his concern was for their social standing, not for our relationship. I took a deep breath and called him back. He answered on the first ring. Finally he said, "Have you reconsidered your position?" "No," I said simply. "My decision stands." "This is your last chance, Harper." His voice was deadly serious. "If you don't attend this wedding, you are no longer a member of this family in any meaningful way. No trust fund, no inheritance. No family connections or support. Nothing. I understand, I said. Do you? Do you understand what you're throwing away? Generations of wealth and privilege. Your birthright. Your place in a family that has given you everything. Something inside me snapped. Years of suppressed feelings burst through the dam I had carefully constructed. Given me everything, I repeated, my voice rising. You gave me a roof and food and clothes. You gave me the bare minimum required by law. What you never gave me was your time, your attention, your pride, or your unconditional love. Those all went to Jacob. That's not true, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. It is true, and we both know it. I was an afterthought from the day Jacob was born. I was the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble, the one who achieved everything on my own because I knew better than to expect your help. I put myself through the second half of college when you cut me off for taking time to help Mom. I built my career without a single contact from your precious network. I made myself into someone successful and confident and whole, despite you, not because of you. Harper Jean Wilson, he began, but I cut him off. Number. You don't get to silence me anymore. You don't get to threaten me with disinheritance as if that's the worst thing that could happen to me. Go ahead. Cut me off. I make more money than all of you combined. The words hung in the air between us. I hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even consciously formulated the thought. But as soon as they left my mouth, I knew they were true. My father was silent for so long, I thought he might have hung up. What did you just say? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. I said I make more money than all of you combined. I repeated more calmly this time. My base salary is 7 figures. My stock options are worth millions. I own my home outright. I have investments, savings, and enough financial security to last several lifetimes. I don't need your money, Dad. I never did. What I needed was your love, but I've finally accepted that's something you can't or won't give me. The silence stretched between us, heavy, with 3 decades of misunderstanding and pain. I have to go, he said finally. We'll discuss this another time. No, we won't, I said. There's nothing left to discuss. I've said everything I needed to say. The rest is up to you. He hung up without another word. I sat on my couch, Luna's head in my lap, and let the tears come. Not tears of regret or loss, but of release. I had finally spoken my truth after years of silence. Whatever happened next, I would face it as the woman I had become, not the daughter they had never truly wanted. The day after my confrontation with my father, my phone remained silent. I went to work, led a productive design review, and had dinner with friends, as if my entire family paradigm hadn't just imploded. It was almost anticlimactic how normal everything felt. The silence lasted exactly 48 hours. Then my mother called, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. Harper, do you have a moment to talk? I'm listening, I said, bracing myself for another guilt trip or manipulation attempt. Instead, she said, Your father told me about your conversation, about your job, and your financial situation. Of course, money was the only thing that could change the power dynamic in our family. Yes, I confirmed. I'm doing very well professionally. He said, You're a director at a major technology company, with people working under you? The surprise in her voice was both amusing and painful. Had they really thought so little of my capabilities? I'm the director of user experience at Horizon Technologies. I lead a department of 15 designers and developers, yes. I had no idea, she said softly. You never mentioned. I tried, Mom. Many times. No one was interested. There was a pause. Then she said, I'd like to hear about it now, if you're willing to tell me. For the first time in my adult life, my mother asked me questions about my work, my life, my accomplishments. She listened as I described my role, my team, my vision for the products we created. She asked follow-up questions that showed she was actually paying attention. When I mentioned my house, she asked to see photos exclaiming appropriately over the view and the architecture. "Harper," she said when I finished, "I don't know what to say. You've built an impressive life for yourself." Yes, I agreed. I have. I wish. I wish we had paid more attention, she said, her voice catching slightly. I think perhaps we didn't know how to relate to you. You were always so independent, so capable. I had to be, I said simply. No one else was going to take care of me. Another long pause. About the wedding, she began. My decision hasn't changed, I said firmly. I understand, she said, surprising me again. I just wanted you to know that we've adjusted the wedding party. Your cousin Allison will be the maid of honor now. She's a good choice, I said. She and Jacob were always close. Yes. My mother hesitated. Harper, would you be willing to talk again sometime? Perhaps we could start over in a way. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of the decades of emotional neglect, but it was something. A crack in the wall, a first step. I'd be open to that, I said cautiously. But I need you to understand that our relationship would have to be different, based on who I actually am, not who you wanted me to be. I think I'd like to get to know who you actually are, she said quietly, if you'll give me the chance. We ended the call with a tentative plan to speak again the following week. I felt oddly light afterward, as if a weight I had carried for so long had begun to shift. The next call came from Jacob, his voice lacking the artificial cheer of our previous conversation. So he said, Director of User Experience. Huh, that sounds important. It is, I confirmed. Dad's been weird since your phone call, like really quiet. Mom's been asking all these questions about whether he ever attended any of your college events. I said nothing, waiting for him to continue. I've been thinking about what you said, he admitted. About us not being close. About Mom and Dad favoring me. I always thought it was the opposite, you know. That you were the smart one they were proud of, and I was just the kid they had to push to keep up. That wasn't my experience, I said carefully. Yeah, I'm starting to get that, he sighed heavily. Look, I'm sorry about the maid of honor thing. That was my fault. I just assumed you'd do it because you always did whatever the family needed. I never considered you might have your own life that was more important. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from my brother. Not perfect, still centered on his perspective, but genuine in its way. I hope your wedding is everything you want it to be, I said sincerely. And I hope Elizabeth makes you happy. Thanks, he said. I wish you could meet her. She's actually really cool when she's not stressing about the wedding. Maybe sometime after we could visit you in Seattle. See this fancy house of yours? I'd consider that, I said. If you're serious about wanting to build a real relationship. I think I am, he said, sounding somewhat surprised at himself. It's weird, but finding out my big sister is some hotshot tech executive makes me want to know you better. The real you, not the you I thought I knew. After we hung up, I sat on my deck watching the sunset over Puget Sound, trying to process the seismic shift in my family dynamics. My success, the very thing they had dismissed and ignored for years, had suddenly made me visible to them. It was both gratifying and sad. The final call came from Elizabeth the next day. Her tone was dramatically different from our previous conversation. Harper, I feel just terrible about our misunderstanding, she gushed. Jacob explained everything about your incredible career and responsibilities. I had no idea you were so important at your company. It's not a misunderstanding, Elizabeth I said calmly. No one asked me if I wanted or was able to be maid of honor. That decision was made without my input. Well, yes, and that was very wrong, she conceded quickly. Jacob has been properly chastised, I assure you. But I was thinking perhaps you might reconsider attending as a guest. No responsibilities, no pressure. We would seat you at the family table, of course. And I'd love to introduce you to my Uncle William. He's a venture capitalist with several tech investments. You two would have so much to talk about. I almost laughed at the transparent attempt to appeal to my professional interests after the emotional manipulation had failed. Thank you for the invitation, I said. But my answer remains the same. I have commitments here that I can't break. I understand completely, she said, though her disappointed tone suggested otherwise. Career always comes first. That's what my mother always says. It's not about putting career first, I corrected her. It's about honoring the commitments I've made and being true to myself and my boundaries. Of course, she said quickly. Well, the offer stands if anything changes, and Jacob mentioned possibly visiting you after the honeymoon. I've never been to Seattle. I hear it's lovely despite the rain. I made a non-committal sound, unwilling to agree to a visit that might never materialize. After that flurry of calls, things quieted down again. I sent a generous wedding gift, an antique silver tea service I knew would appeal to Elizabeth's taste for tradition and status. I included a warm note, wishing them happiness in their marriage. It was the right balance, I felt, between acknowledging the event and maintaining my boundaries. My decision stood. I would not attend the wedding. I would not play the role of the dutiful daughter one last time. But I had opened a door to a possible new relationship with my family, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and pretense. Whether they would walk through that door remained to be seen, but for the first time I felt I could accept either outcome with equanimity. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer the forgotten daughter begging for scraps of attention. I was Harper Wilson, successful in my own right, confident in my worth, clear about my boundaries. If my family wanted a place in my life going forward, it would be on these new terms or not at all. As the wedding date approached, I felt occasional twinges of doubt and guilt. Old habits die hard, and I had been conditioned from childhood to put my family's needs before my own. But when those moments came, I reminded myself of all I had built here in Seattle. My fulfilling career, my beautiful home, my loyal friends who loved and supported the real me, my sweet dog who gave unconditional love without demanding perfect obedience in return. I had created a life that reflected my true self, not the pale shadow my family had tried to make me, and I had done it entirely on my own. No matter what happened with my birth family, that achievement could never be taken away from me. The day of Jacob's wedding came and went. I spent it hiking Mount Rainier with Eliza Daniel and Jasmine, enjoying the crisp autumn air and spectacular views of the surrounding mountains. We took a celebratory selfie at the summit, 4 friends, grinning with wind-blown hair and flushed cheeks. I posted it on my private social media with the caption, "Sometimes the family you choose is the one that truly sees you." A week later, an envelope arrived, containing professional photographs from the wedding. My mother had sent them with a brief note. "Thought you might like to see these. The tea service was beautiful. Elizabeth was thrilled. Call when you can." I spread the photos across my kitchen island, studying the smiling faces of my family and the elaborate decorations of the Drake Hotel ballroom. There was Jacob, in his tuxedo, beaming at his bride. My parents, perfectly coordinated in navy blue, standing proudly beside the couple. Extended family arranged in careful groupings. everyone playing their assigned roles perfectly. For the first time, I could look at such images without feeling the sting of exclusion. I was not in these photos because I had chosen not to be, not because I had been pushed to the margins. It was a subtle but profound difference. The weeks after the wedding brought tentative changes in my relationship with my family. My mother called every Sunday, awkward at first, but gradually finding her way into real conversations. She asked about my projects at work, remembered the names of my friends, even inquired about Luna. When I mentioned a particularly challenging work situation, she offered thoughtful advice rather than criticism. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Jacob and Elizabeth sent a postcard from their honeymoon in the Maldives, with a handwritten note saying they were serious about visiting Seattle in the spring. I responded with a brief email, welcoming the idea, suggesting some local attractions they might enjoy. My father remained the most distant, still struggling to adjust to our new dynamic. He joined one of my calls with my mother, briefly asking stiff but polite questions about my work. He seemed genuinely impressed when I explained a complex technical challenge my team had recently solved, though he tried to hide it beneath his usual reserve. The most dramatic shift came just before Christmas, when my mother called with an unexpected question. "Harper, your father and I were wondering if you might consider joining us for the holidays this year. We could come to Seattle if that would be easier for you." I was momentarily speechless. In all my years, my parents had never offered to travel to me. "You would come here," I finally managed. "If you'd have us," she said. "We'd like to see your home, meet these friends we've heard so much about, get to know your life there." I agreed, partly out of curiosity, partly from a cautious hope that this represented a genuine desire for change. We arranged for them to stay at a nearby hotel for 3 days over Christmas. Jacob and Elizabeth would remain in Chicago with her family. Preparing for their visit, I felt a strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation. I cleaned my already immaculate house-planned meals, arranged a small Christmas tree in the living room with a view of the Sound. I didn't expect perfection, but I wanted them to see that I had built something beautiful here, something worthy of respect. They arrived on Christmas Eve, my father carrying luggage, my mother clutching a bag of carefully wrapped gifts. Their expressions as they entered my home and took in the soaring ceilings, the wall of windows facing the water, the tasteful modern decor, shifted from polite interest to genuine amazement. "Harper," my mother breathed, "this is stunning." My father walked to the windows, staring out at the view. "You've done well for yourself," he said quietly. Coming from him, it was practically effusive praise. The visit wasn't without its awkward moments and old patterns trying to reassert themselves. My mother still occasionally slipped into giving unsolicited advice. My father still struggled to show emotion. But there were new moments, too. My father asking thoughtful questions about my work. My mother genuinely connecting with my friends over Christmas dinner. Both of them playing with Luna in the backyard, looking more relaxed than I could remember seeing them. On their final evening, as we sat by the fireplace with glasses of wine, my father cleared his throat. "I owe you an apology, Harper," he said, staring into his glass, rather than meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how we treated you growing up, about the events we missed, the support we didn't give. I'm not good at admitting when I'm wrong, but in this case I was." I waited, hardly daring to breathe. "You deserved better from us," he continued. "You were always so capable, so self-sufficient, that I think we convinced ourselves you didn't need us the way Jacob did. It was easier to focus on his more obvious needs than to understand your quieter ones. That wasn't fair to you." "No," I agreed softly. "It wasn't." "I can't change the past," he said, finally looking up at me. "But I would like to do better going forward, if you'll allow it." It wasn't a perfect apology. It contained hints of justification, traces of the old narrative. But it was sincere, and for my father it represented a seismic shift in perspective. "I'd like that too," I said. After they left, returning to Chicago, with promises to call and plans for another visit in the summer, I sat on my deck, wrapped in a blanket against the winter chill. Luna curled at my feet as I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. 6 months ago, I had felt invisible to my own family, a peripheral character in their story. Now, through standing firm in my truth and my worth, I had begun to rewrite that narrative. Not by changing who I was to fit their expectations, but by being so unapologetically myself that they had no choice but to see me clearly at last. The road ahead would not be perfect. Old wounds don't heal overnight. Lifelong patterns don't transform in an instant. There would be setbacks and disappointments along the way. But for the first time, I felt hopeful that a new kind of relationship might be possible, one based on mutual respect rather than obligation and pretense. The most profound lesson I had learned through this journey was that my value had never depended on their recognition. I had always been worthy of love and respect even when those closest to me failed to show it. By finally recognizing that truth myself, by building a life that honored my own needs and boundaries, I had paradoxically created the possibility for genuine connection with my family. True family, I had discovered, wasn't about blood ties or obligation. It wasn't about perfect holiday photographs or maintaining appearances. It was about seeing each other, clearly respecting each other's autonomy, celebrating each other's successes, without jealousy or conditions. Sometimes that family included the people we were born to. Sometimes it was the one we created for ourselves, through friendship and mutual care. In the luckiest cases, it could be both. As the sun set over Puget Sound, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. Whatever the future held with my birth family, I knew now that I would never again make myself smaller to fit someone else's narrative. I would never again accept being invisible. I had found my voice, my strength, and my true home, not in a place or with certain people, but within myself. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose themselves sometimes. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your worth isn't determined by how others see you, but by how clearly you see yourself.